I knew I'd made a terrible mistake the moment Kim Deyoon's hand moved toward his gun. As a former self-defense instructor who'd worked with trauma survivors, I'd seen every kind of violence imaginable. But this was different. This was a mafia boss discovering that his new maid, me, Sloane Walker, had been secretly teaching his blind 9-year-old daughter to fight. The daughter who hadn't moved without assistance since the car accident that stole her sight 8 months ago. The accident, I'd learned, was no accident at all. I'd arrived at the Kim estate 3 weeks earlier, expecting to clean a house and keep my head down. Instead, I found a fortress and a ghost. Desam moved through those marble halls like she was apologizing for existing, always waiting, always guided, never asking for anything. It broke something in me I thought I'd left behind when I quit teaching. So I started small. A movement here while dusting. A breathing exercise there while folding laundry. Then one morning in the courtyard, Desam tilted her head toward me and whispered, "What are you doing?" "Practicing strength," I told her. "Want to feel what it sounds like?" That's how it started. How I began teaching this fragile child to become a warrior. Now, standing in that sunlit courtyard with Desam in a perfect fighter's stance beside me, her crimson blindfold stark against her pale skin, her small fists positioned with precision I'd spent weeks teaching her, I watched her father freeze in the doorway.
King Do-yo.
The man whose background check I definitely should have run more carefully. The man whose eyes were supposed to be dead, but were now flooding with something I recognized, hope wrestling with terror. "Feel the ground beneath you, Desam," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart hammered. "You don't need eyes to know where your strength lives. Now, punch through the fear. Not at it, through it." Desam's fist shot forward with surprising force. The girl who'd flinched at footsteps was now striking at invisible enemies with purpose. Deyoon's hand had moved to his gun, then stopped. He stood there, this man who commanded fear like a weapon, looking completely powerless. And somehow, watching him watch his daughter reclaim her strength, I knew I'd just changed all 3 of our lives forever. I just didn't know if he was going to kill me or thank me. Turns out it would be so much more complicated than either. Before we dive into how a self-defense instructor ended up teaching a blind mafia princess to fight, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. You're about to be part of something special, and I want you here for every twist, every revelation, every moment that changes everything. I arrived at the Kim estate on a Tuesday morning when the Los Angeles sun was just beginning to burn through the marine layer. The house, no, calling it a house was like calling the ocean a puddle, rose before me like something out of a crime thriller. All sharp angles and tinted glass, surrounded by walls that didn't just suggest privacy, but demanded it. The kind of place where security cameras tracked your every breath and armed men pretended to be gardeners. I should have turned around right then. But I needed this job. More than that, I needed to disappear into a life so ordinary that my past couldn't find me. Former self-defense instructor turned domestic worker seemed ordinary enough. Anonymous enough. The man who answered the door wasn't ordinary at all. Kim Deyoon stood in the marble entryway like he owned not just the house, but the very air inside it. Expensive suit, perfectly tailored. Hair styled with the kind of precision that spoke of control in every aspect of his life. But it was his eyes that made my survival instinct scream, dark, assessing, the kind of eyes that had watched men beg and hadn't blinked. "Ms. Walker." His English was flawless, accent barely detectable. "You come highly recommended. By a friend of a friend who owed me a favor and asked no questions." I wondered what background check he'd actually run, if he knew about the restraining orders I'd helped women file, the self-defense workshops in battered women's shelters, the ex-boyfriend of a client who'd threatened to make me pay for interfering. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Kim." I kept my voice steady, professional. Let him see a woman who needed work, nothing more. His gaze lingered a moment too long, and I knew he was categorizing me. Threat level, minimal. Useful, potentially. Disposable. Absolutely. My daughter requires consistency, he said, turning to lead me deeper into the fortress. The previous staff found her challenging. Challenging. The word hung in the air like a warning. We walked through rooms that belonged in architectural magazines, all clean lines and carefully curated emptiness. Beautiful and cold. The kind of home that wasn't meant to be lived in, just displayed. Then I saw her. Desam sat in a sunroom that overlooked a courtyard, perched on the edge of a leather chair like she was afraid to fully commit to existing in the space. 9 years old according to the file I'd been given, but she looked smaller, folded in on herself. Her hands were clasped in her lap, fingers twisted together. A silk blindfold covered her eyes, crimson red, the color of her dress, carefully coordinated even though she couldn't see it. Desam. Diyun's voice gentled in a way I hadn't expected. This is Ms. Walker. She'll be helping around the house. The girl's head turned slightly toward his voice, but she didn't speak. Didn't move beyond that small acknowledgement. Hello, Desam, I said softly, crouching down so I wasn't towering over her. It's nice to meet you. Nothing. Not even a whisper. Diyun's jaw tightened. She doesn't speak much. Since the accident.
Accident.
The word felt rehearsed, a story told so many times it had worn smooth. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand flexed at his side like he was resisting the urge to reach for something, or someone, to destroy. That's okay, I said, still focused on Desam. Sometimes words aren't necessary. Over the next few hours, Diyun laid out my duties with military precision, then disappeared into his office with men in dark suits who looked like they ate danger for breakfast. I was left to observe my new charge. Desam moved through the house like a ghost haunting her own life, always waiting for someone to guide her, always asking permission with her silence. When Mrs. Chun, the housekeeper, led her to lunch, Desam's steps were tentative, uncertain, her hand clutching the older woman's arm like a lifeline. But it wasn't just the blindness. I'd worked with visually impaired kids before. They learned to navigate, to adapt, to own their space with confidence. Desam had learned something else entirely. She'd learned to disappear, to make herself so small, so quiet, so undemanding that maybe the violence that had found her once wouldn't find her again. She'd learned that being seen, even metaphorically, was dangerous. And watching her fold herself into nothing in a house full of everything, I felt something crack open in my chest. The thing I'd promised myself I'd left behind when I walked away from teaching. The need to help someone remember they were worth fighting for. Even if it meant fighting the most dangerous man in Los Angeles to do it. It took me 5 days to understand the rhythm of the Kim household. Diyun disappeared for hours into his office or vanished entirely in black cars with tinted windows. Mrs. Chin managed the kitchen and kept her opinions to herself. The security team rotated in shifts, always watching, never speaking.
And Desam?
Desam existed in the spaces between everything else, silent and still. On the 6th morning, I found her in the courtyard. She sat on the stone bench in a patch of sunlight, hands folded, face tilted slightly upward like she was trying to remember what warmth felt like. The crimson blindfold was perfectly tied, her pale blue dress perfectly pressed. Everything about her was perfect and empty. Good morning, Desam, I said, keeping my distance. I'm just going to tidy up the courtyard. I'll be quiet. The smallest nod. Permission granted. Or maybe just acknowledgement that I existed. I started with the obvious tasks, sweeping the stone patio, straightening the cushions on the outdoor furniture. But as I moved, I let my body remember what it used to know. The controlled breathing, the centered stance, the deliberate weight shifts that came from years of Krav Maga training. I didn't think she'd notice. Blind children navigated by sound, yes, but these were subtle movements. Quiet ones. But then her head tilted. Just slightly. Tracking something. I continued, transitioning into a basic ready position as I reached for a potted plant. My feet shoulder-width apart, knees soft, core engaged. Not obvious, just present. Desam's head turned further, following the whisper of my movement. I'm moving some of the plants, I said casually. Better for the sunlight. She didn't respond, but her attention was locked on me now. I could feel it. I made my next movement more deliberate. A slow pivot, weight transferring from one foot to the other. The sound of my shoes on stone creating a rhythm, grounded, intentional, strong.
Dasames lips parted slightly.
You can hear it, can't you? I asked softly, setting down the plant. The difference between moving because you have to and moving because you choose to. Her hands unclenched in her lap. The first voluntary movement I'd seen from her all week. I crouched down, still several feet away. I used to teach people how to move like that, how to own the space around them. I paused, watching her process the information. Want to feel what strength sounds like. For a long moment, nothing. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. Yes. My heart kicked against my ribs. First word I'd heard her speak. Okay, I said gently. I'm going to come closer. I'll tell you everything I'm doing. I approached slowly, narrating each step. Dasam's breathing quickened, but she didn't pull away. When I was beside her, I held out my hand. I'm offering you my hand. It's right in front of you, about chest height. She reached out tentatively, her small fingers finding mine. Her hand was shaking. You're safe, I told her. I'm just going to help you stand, and then I'm going to show you something. Is that okay? Another whisper. Okay. I guided her to stand, then positioned myself beside her. I'm going to take your hands and place them on my arms so you can feel my position. Tell me if anything feels uncomfortable. She nodded, and I carefully placed her hands on my forearms. I shifted into a basic fighting stance. Nothing aggressive, just grounded and ready. Feel that? I asked. My feet are apart, about as wide as my shoulders. My knees are soft, not locked. My weight is balanced between both legs. I moved slightly. That's power. Not the kind that hurts people. The kind that means nobody can push you over unless you choose to move. Dasam's fingers tightened on my arms, learning the position through touch. Wanna try? I can't, she whispered. I'll fall. Not if you know where your center is. And I'm right here. I stepped behind her, gently guiding her feet apart. Your body knows how to do this, Dasam. It's been waiting for permission. I adjusted her stance carefully, feet positioned, knees slightly bent, shoulders back. Her whole body was trembling, but she didn't resist. Now feel the ground beneath you, I said quietly. You don't need eyes to know where your strength lives. It comes from here. I touched her core gently. From your center. From the part of you that decides you're worth the space you take up.
Dasames prilling chanted.
Deepened. Her trembling began to ease. That's it, I encouraged. That's your warrior stance. She stood there in the sunlight, blind and 9 years old and terrified, but standing.
Really standing.
For the first time since I'd met her, Dasam Kim wasn't apologizing for existing. Behind us, a door opened. Heavy footsteps on stone. I turned to see Diyun frozen in the doorway, his face a mask of shock. And I realized I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. I barely slept that night, replaying the moment Diyun had walked in on us. After that initial shock, his face had gone carefully blank, the expression of a man who'd learned to hide every thought, every feeling. He'd simply nodded once and walked away, leaving me standing there with his daughter, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I'd expected to be fired. Or worse. Instead, morning came with a knock on my door before sunrise. I opened it to find Dasam standing in the hallway, her small hand trailing along the wall for guidance. She was still in her pajamas, feet bare, her blindfold slightly crooked like she'd tied it herself. "Ms. Walker?" Her voice was uncertain but present. Can we do another lesson?" I stared at her, this ghost child who'd barely spoken in a week, now standing at my door at dawn asking for something. Asking for anything.
Dasom, Ibrid.
"You came here by yourself?" A tiny nod. I counted the steps. 15 from my room to yours. I only got lost once. Something fierce and protective surged through me. "Give me 5 minutes to change. Meet me in the courtyard." "Okay." She smiled, small and tentative but real. Then she turned and carefully made her way back down the hall, counting under her breath. I dressed quickly, my mind racing. Diyun hadn't stopped her. Either he didn't know she'd left her room, or he was allowing this. I wasn't sure which possibility was more dangerous. Dasom was already in the courtyard when I arrived, standing in almost the exact spot from yesterday. Waiting. But not passive anymore. There was intention in her posture now, a readiness that hadn't existed before. "Good morning, warrior," I said softly. Her smile widened. "Good morning, Ms. Walker. Before we start, I need to explain something." I moved beside her. "What I'm teaching you, it's not just about standing strong. Martial arts for people who can't see is about owning your space. Understanding that nobody can take it from you unless you let them. Does that make sense? Like how Appa owns every room he walks into?" The observation startled me.
Yes.
"But your father does it with fear. We're going to teach you to do it with confidence. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Fear makes people smaller. Confidence lets them grow." I positioned myself beside her. "Now, let's work on your stance. Remember how your feet felt yesterday?" For the next 20 minutes, we moved through basics. I kept my voice low, describing each position, letting her feel the movements through my guidance. She was tentative at first, but muscle memory was already forming. Her body was remembering what it felt like to claim space instead of shrink from it. "Now," I said, "I want you to try something. Punch forward, like you're pushing through water. You're not trying to hurt anything, you're just proving you can move with purpose." Dasom's small fist shot out, stronger than I expected. Again, I encouraged. Through the fear, not at it. She punched again, and this time there was force behind it. Intent. Her face was fierce with concentration, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Determination. That's when I felt it. The weight of being watched. Diyun stood in the doorway, exactly where he'd been yesterday. How long had he been there? His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on his daughter with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Good, Dasom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's enough for today. But we just started. We'll practice more later. I promise." She nodded reluctantly, and I guided her to the bench. She sat, face flushed with exertion, chest rising and falling with proud breaths. Diyun approached slowly, his footsteps measured. Dasom's head turned toward the sound. "Appa." "I'm here, sweetheart." His voice was rougher than usual. I stood, ready to defend myself, to explain, but when his eyes met mine, I saw something I hadn't expected. They were wet. Not crying, not quite, but close. The careful control had cracked. "Mr. Kim, I can explain." He held up a hand, silencing me. For a long moment, he just looked at his daughter, this child who'd been broken and silent, now sitting with her shoulders back and her chin raised. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My daughter hasn't asked for anything in 8 months." The words hung between us, weighted with grief and wonder. He turned to me fully, and I saw the mafia boss stripped away, leaving only a father who'd been watching his child disappear and didn't know how to bring her back. "Don't stop," he said quietly. "Whatever you're doing, don't stop." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but when it came, it was like watching spring arrive after an endless winter. 3 weeks after that first lesson, I found Dasam navigating the hallway alone, one hand trailing lightly along the wall, not clutching, just maintaining connection. She was counting steps under her breath, mapping the house in her mind. When she reached the kitchen doorway, she paused, tilted her head to identify the sounds within, then walked through with confidence. Mrs. Chen looked up from her cutting board, eyes widening. In 6 months, she'd never seen Dasam move without being guided. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," Dasam said, her voice clear and steady. The housekeeper's knife clattered against the counter. "Good morning, little one." Dasam smiled and continued through, heading toward the courtyard for our morning session. I followed at a distance, my heart swelling with pride and something dangerously close to love. Our training had evolved. We'd moved beyond basic stances into movement sequences designed for visually impaired practitioners, flowing patterns that taught spatial awareness and muscle memory. Dasam absorbed everything like she'd been starving for it. Some mornings, I'd find her in the courtyard before sunrise, practicing alone, her small body moving through the forms I'd taught her. But the real change wasn't in her movements. It was in her laughter. Again, she demanded one morning after successfully completing a defensive sequence. Her face was flushed, her breath coming quick, and she was grinning. "I want to do it faster this time." "Warrior, you're going to wear me out," I teased, but I was grinning too. She laughed, a real, full laugh that echoed off the courtyard walls. The sound made my chest ache. How long had it been since this house had heard a child laugh? "I'm not tired," she insisted. "I could train all day." "Your body needs rest too. That's part of being strong, knowing when to push and when to recover." She pouted but accepted it, dropping into her cool-down stretches with the discipline of someone twice her age. As she stretched, she said thoughtfully, "Ms. Walker, I want to be strong like the fighters App respects." I crouched down to her level, even though she couldn't see me. Somehow it still mattered. "What kind of strong do you think they are?" "The kind that makes people scared. The kind that nobody messes with." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was describing the weather. My heart clenched. Of course she'd think that. In her world, strength meant dominance. Power meant fear. "Dasam, can I tell you something important?" She nodded, turning her face toward my voice. "Real strength isn't about making people fear you. It's about not being afraid of yourself." I took her small hand in mine. "Your father's men, they're afraid. That's why they need to make others scared. But you're learning something different. You're learning that you're strong enough to be kind, brave enough to be vulnerable. That's real warrior strength." She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "Are you afraid of Appa?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about Diyun, the way he'd watched our sessions from the doorway, never interrupting but always present. The way his carefully controlled mask would slip when he looked at his daughter. The way his eyes had started finding mine across rooms, holding a beat too long. "No," I said finally. "I'm not afraid of your father." "Why not?" "Everyone else is." "Because I see him. But I can't see, and I'm still afraid sometimes." "Not that kind of seeing." I squeezed her hand gently. "I see who he is underneath everything else. The part he tries to hide. And that part isn't scary. It's just human." Dasam considered this. "What do you see when you look at me?" "I see a warrior who's braver than she knows. Someone who lost her sight but is learning to see in ways most people never will. I see someone who's going to do amazing things." Her smile was radiant. "Will you still teach me? Even when I'm amazing?" "Especially then. Amazing people need to keep growing." She threw her arms around me suddenly, fiercely. I held her close. This child who'd been a ghost just weeks ago, now vibrant and alive and reaching for the world instead of hiding from it. Over her shoulder, I saw Dune standing in the doorway. How much had he heard? His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Gratitude, maybe. Or recognition. Or something more dangerous than either. He nodded once, then disappeared back into the house, leaving me holding his daughter and wondering how much longer I could pretend this was just a job. And just when you think you know where this is heading, a heartwarming story about healing and hope, everything is about to shift. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now because what comes next will test everything these three people have built together. The summons came on a Thursday evening, delivered by Jinho, Diyun's stone-faced lieutenant. Mr. Kim requests your presence in his office. Not asks. Requests. The kind of request that wasn't really a request at all. I'd been in the Kim household for 7 weeks, but had never been invited into Diyun's inner sanctum. The office was on the second floor, behind a door that always remained closed. Whatever happened in that room stayed in that room, and the staff knew better than to be curious. Jinho led me down the hallway, his hand resting casually near his jacket, where I knew he kept his gun. He knocked twice, waited for the low "come in," then opened the door and gestured me through. Diyun sat behind a massive desk of dark wood, the city lights of Los Angeles sprawling behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. For the first time, I saw the tattoos that wound up his forearms, intricate, beautiful, and undoubtedly marking him as someone important in a world I didn't want to understand. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat, keeping my spine straight, my expression neutral. Whatever this was, I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me nervous. He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, "Do you know what I really do, Ms. Walker?"
No preamble.
No easing into it. Just the question I'd been avoiding since the day I walked through his gates. "I know you're a dangerous man," I said evenly. "I know men with guns follow you everywhere. I know people are afraid to say your name too loudly." I met his eyes. "I know you're not running a tech startup, Mr. Kim." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. "And yet you stayed."
I stayed for Dawson.
"My daughter." He leaned back in his chair. "Who you've been teaching to fight without my explicit permission." "You gave me permission. That morning in the courtyard. I told you not to stop. I didn't tell you to turn my blind daughter into a warrior." But there was no heat in his words. If anything, he sounded curious. "She was already a warrior," I said quietly. "I just reminded her." He was silent for a beat. "Then, you're not afraid of me." "Should I be?" "Most people are. Most people don't see past the armor." I leaned forward slightly. "I know you're a dangerous man, Mr. Kim. I also know you love your daughter more than your empire, even if you haven't figured that out yet." The words hung in the air between us, bold and presumptuous and completely true. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. Then he laughed, short and humorless, but genuine. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both." He opened a drawer, pulled out a check, and slid it across the desk. I glanced down and nearly choked. He'd doubled my salary. More than doubled it. "Mr. Kim." "My enemies don't distinguish between soldiers and staff," he interrupted, his voice hardening. "If you stay in this house, you become a target. That money is compensation for the risk and a severance package if you choose to leave. I won't blame you if you do." I looked at the check, then at him. This was my out. A clean exit with enough money to disappear somewhere safe, somewhere far from mafia bosses and their broken daughters and the danger that followed them like a shadow. "Teach me," I said. His eyes narrowed. "What? If staying makes me a target, then teach me to be a harder target." I pushed the check back across the desk. "I'll take the raise, but I'm not leaving."
Dawson needs me.
"This isn't a game, Ms. Walker. People die in my world." "Then teach me how not to be one of them." We stared at each other across the desk, and something shifted in the air, something electric and dangerous. His gaze dropped to my mouth just for a second, then back to my eyes. The attraction had been building for weeks, simmering under every stolen glance, every moment he watched me with his daughter. Now it crackled between us, undeniable. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice lower now. "I'm asking to stay. I'm asking to protect what matters." I held his gaze. "Unless you're afraid of having someone around who isn't scared of you." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" "Probably." He stood, walked around the desk, and extended his hand. "Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., the gym downstairs. Don't be late." I took his hand, his grip strong and warm, and felt the future shift beneath my feet. "I won't be." The scream tore through the house at 2 in the morning, high-pitched and terrified, shattering the silence like broken glass. I was out of bed before I was fully awake, running down the hallway in my sleep shirt and bare feet. Desam's door was already open. She never closed it completely, afraid of being trapped in darkness. She couldn't escape. She was huddled in the corner of her bed, blindfold askew, hands pressed over her ears, sobbing.
Amma.
"Amma, please." "I can't see, Amma. Where are you?" My heart shattered.
Dawson, sweetheart, I'm here.
I approached slowly, hands out even though she couldn't see them. "It's Ms. Walker. You're safe. You're home." "The car, it's spinning." Amma won't answer. Her whole body shook with sobs. I sat on the edge of her bed, gathering her into my arms. She clung to me, small and fragile and drowning in a memory 8 months old that still had teeth. "I've got you," I whispered, rocking her gently. "You're safe. The accident is over. You're here with me." "But, Amma," she was right next to me, and then she wasn't, and I couldn't see. I still can't see. "I know, baby. I know." I held her tighter, my own tears threatening. Her mother had died in that crash. The accident that Diyun's enemies had orchestrated to break him. They'd succeeded, but not in the way they'd intended. They'd broken his daughter instead. I started humming without thinking, an old lullaby my grandmother used to sing. Slowly, I added words, my voice soft and low. Desam's sobs began to quiet, her breathing evening out. I kept singing, kept holding her, until her grip on my shirt loosened and her body went heavy against mine. "Don't leave," she mumbled, already half asleep. "I won't. I'm right here." I shifted carefully, laying her back against the pillows, but she wouldn't let go of my hand. So I stayed, curling up beside her on top of the covers, keeping her anchored to the present. That's where Diyun found us. I woke to the feeling of being watched, my body going tense before I remembered where I was. Diyun stood in the doorway, still in his dress shirt and slacks from whatever late-night meeting he'd attended. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked exhausted and lost and completely undone. Our eyes met in the dim light from the hallway. I saw the question there, what happened? I carefully extracted myself from Desam's grip, replacing my hand with her favorite stuffed rabbit. She murmured, but didn't wake. I slipped from the bed and joined Diyun in the hallway, pulling the door partially closed behind me. "Nightmare," I whispered. "About the accident. About her mother." His jaw clenched, a muscle jumping. "How often does this happen?" "Mrs. Chun says once or twice a week. She usually just cries herself back to sleep. And tonight? Tonight she needed someone to hold her." I met his eyes. "She needs that more than once or twice a week, Mr. Kim. She needs." "I know what she needs." His voice was rough, broken. "Come with me." He turned and walked toward his office. I followed, my heart racing. Inside, he closed the door and leaned against his desk, running a hand through his hair. The careful control he always maintained was cracking, pieces of it falling away. "I can't give her what she needs," he said finally, not looking at me. "I don't know how. I can protect her from external threats. I can give her everything money can buy. But this?" He gestured helplessly toward Desam's room. "Comfort? Love? the ability to heal from what I couldn't prevent. He laughed bitterly. I only know how to destroy things, Ms. Walker. I've built an empire on it. I stepped closer, drawn by the rawness in his voice. Then let someone help you build something instead. He looked up, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke me.
Why?
Why do you care so much? Because she deserves someone who will fight for her healing, not just her safety. I moved closer still. And because you deserve to know you're more than what you've had to become. The air between us thickened, charged. His eyes dropped to my mouth, and I saw him war with himself, the dangerous man and the desperate father colliding. Sloane, he breathed, using my first name for the first time. He reached out, his hand cupping my jaw. I leaned into his touch, my heart thundering. This was dangerous. This was impossible. This was. The door burst open. Jinho stood there, phone in hand, his expression grim. Boss. The Nakamura Syndicate. They're moving tonight. Diyun's hand dropped from my face, the moment shattering. His mask slammed back into place, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mafia boss. How many? His voice was ice. At least a dozen. Maybe more. Diyun straightened, already moving into tactical mode. Then he looked at me, and I saw fear flash across his face, not for himself, but for me.
Fordasam.
Get her to the safe room, he ordered.
Now.
The safe room was exactly what it sounded like, a reinforced panic room hidden behind a bookshelf in Diyun's study, stocked with supplies, communication equipment, and enough firepower to withstand a siege. I'd carried Dasam there while she was still half asleep, confused and frightened by the sudden urgency. What's happening? She asked, clutching my arm. Just a precaution, sweetheart. We're going to stay here for a little while. Jinho had positioned 2 guards outside the hidden entrance. Through the security monitors, I watched men in tactical gear moving through the house like shadows, setting up defensive positions. Diyun was in the center of it all, issuing orders with cold precision, every inch the ruthless boss his reputation promised. But when he glanced toward the camera that showed the safe room, his mask slipped. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see the fear. The attack never came. Hours passed in tense silence before Jinho finally gave the all-clear. False alarm, he said, but his expression told a different story. They'd been out there, watching, waiting, sending a message. When I finally got Dasam back to her room as dawn broke, she was exhausted and clingy. Don't leave, she whispered, and I promised I wouldn't until she fell asleep. By the time I returned to my own room, the sun was fully up and my body was vibrating with adrenaline and exhaustion. I needed sleep, needed to process what had almost happened, needed. There was an envelope on my bed. Cream-colored paper, expensive. My name written in strong, precise handwriting. I recognized it from the signatures I'd seen on documents around the house. Diyun's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. Sloane, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or preparing to be. Jinho discovered that the Nakamura Syndicate has been watching the house for weeks. They know about you. They know what you mean to Dasam, and they've inferred, correctly, what you're beginning to mean to me. I should have sent you away the moment I realized. Instead, I was selfish. I wanted to keep the light you brought into this house, the life you breathed back into my daughter. Into me. Enclosed are account details and passwords for funds set aside for Dasam's care. There's enough to last her lifetime, managed by trustees outside my organization. Also enclosed are contact details for my lawyer, who has instructions for her guardianship should anything happen to me. I need you to promise me something. If I don't survive tomorrow's meeting with the Nakamura leadership, you'll take Dasam and disappear. Use the money. Change your names. Give her the life she deserves, far away from this world I've built. You've given my daughter her life back. Not just her confidence or her strength, but her actual life, the joy and possibility that was stolen from her. You took a ghost and made her real again. And you gave me something I thought I'd killed years ago, the belief that I could be more than this, more than fear and violence and blood. When you look at me, you see someone worth redeeming. I don't know if that man actually exists, but you made me want to find out. I don't know if I'll survive tomorrow's meeting. The Nakamura won't negotiate in good faith, and I won't surrender what's mine. Which means one of us won't walk away. But know this, Sloane. Loving you and Assam is the only honorable thing I've ever done. In a life built on destruction, you two are the only things I've ever wanted to protect more than I wanted to win. If I don't come back, tell Assam her father died trying to be worthy of her. And tell yourself that you changed a man who thought he was beyond changing. If I do come back, I'm going to ask you to take a chance on someone who doesn't deserve it. I'm going to ask you to stay, to be the family we both need, to help me build something good out of all this darkness. Either way, thank you. For seeing me. For saving her. For making me remember what it feels like to hope.
Duyon.
P.S. The meeting is set for 8 p.m. tomorrow at the warehouse on Alameda. If you don't hear from me by midnight, take Dasam and run. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. This man, this dangerous, powerful, broken man, was preparing to die. And he was spending his final hours making sure his daughter and I would be safe. Like hell. I looked at the clock.
7:15 a.m.
That gave me less than 13 hours. I grabbed my phone and started making calls. If Dune thought I was going to sit in this house and wait for him to sacrifice himself, he didn't know me at all. I hadn't taught Dasam to fight just so she could lose her father. And I hadn't fallen in love with Kim Dune just to let him die for us. I'd left Dasam with Mrs. Chen, made up an excuse about errands, and spent the day calling in every favor I had. Former colleagues from my self-defense teaching days. A private investigator who owed me. Anyone who might have information on the Nakamura Syndicate or the warehouse on Alameda. What I learned made my blood run cold. The meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. The Nakamura had no intention of letting Dune walk out alive. I got back to the estate at 9:47 p.m., my heart in my throat. I was too late. The meeting had been at 8. Either Dune was already dead, or... The scene that greeted me made my stomach drop. The front entrance was swarming with Dune's men, all armed, all positioned like they were preparing for war. Jinho stood at the center, barking orders into his phone. "Where is he?" I demanded, grabbing Jinho's arm. He looked at me, his expression grim. "His office." "But Ms. Walker, you can't." I was already running. Guards tried to stop me at the office door, but I shoved past them with a force that surprised us all. The door slammed open, and I saw him. Dune stood behind his desk, jacket off, shirt torn and bloodied. His knuckles were split, a cut above his eyebrow still bleeding. He was alive, but barely. And he was loading a gun with methodical precision, preparing for whatever came next. His head snapped up when I burst in. "Sloane? What are you? You're supposed to be. You're alive." The words came out strangled, somewhere between a sob and a scream. "For now. But you need to leave. Take Dasam and..."
No.
I slammed the door behind me, fury overtaking fear. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to write me a love letter and then throw your life away like it means nothing. This is the only way to protect you. Protect us?" I was shouting now, all the terror of the last 18 hours exploding out of me. By dying? By making Dasam lose another parent? By making me... My voice cracked. "You selfish bastard. You don't get to make me love you, and then choose death." He froze, the gun still in his hand. "Sloane. Dasam doesn't need a dead martyr. She needs her father. She needs the man who watches her train every morning with tears in his eyes. She needs the man who's learning to build instead of destroy." I moved closer, my whole body shaking. And I... The words stuck in my throat, too big and too terrifying. "And you what?"
His voice was raw.
"I'm in love with you, Dune. The confession burst out of me like a dam breaking. I'm in love with your stupid self-sacrificing honor and the way you look at your daughter and the man you're trying to become.
So you don't get to choose death.
You have to choose us. He stared at me, the gun forgotten in his hand. Then he was moving, crossing the distance between us in 3 strides. His hands cupped my face, and his mouth crashed against mine, desperate and fierce and tasting like blood and hope. I kissed him back with everything in me, pouring 8 weeks of tension and fear and love into it. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against his chest, and I could feel his heart racing as fast as mine. I love you, he breathed against my lips. God help me, I love you both so much. The door burst open. We broke apart as Jinho strode in, his face ashen. Boss, we have a problem. Do-yoon's arms tightened around me protectively. What? The Nakamura. They just sent terms. Jinho's voice was hollow. They'll leave Dasam and Ms. Walker alone. They'll end the vendetta. But only if. If what? I demanded. Jinho looked at Do-yoon. If you surrender yourself to them.
Tonight.
Alone. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Do-yoon's jaw clenched. When? They want an answer in 1 hour. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. There has to be another way. There isn't. Do-yoon's voice was calm, resigned. This is what I was preparing for. Then we fight, I insisted. You have men, resources. And they have more. And the fight would destroy everything in its path, including you and Assam. He looked at me, and I saw the decision already made in his eyes. This is the only way to ensure you're safe. I didn't ask to be safe. I ask you to choose us. I am choosing you. I'm choosing your life over mine. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Tears were streaming down my face now. Choosing us means staying, fighting differently, finding another way. There is no other way. Then we make one. Do-yoon pulled away from me, his expression shifting into the cold calculation I'd seen him use in business dealings. But there was something different now, a flicker of possibility where there'd only been resignation before. There are 2 paths, he said slowly, looking between Jinho and me. 2 ways this ends.
Jinho straightened. Boss.
Option 1. We eliminate the Nakamura leadership. Tonight.
Completely.
It would be bloody, costly, and would likely start a war that consumes half of Los Angeles's underworld.
He paused.
But we'd win. We always win. And option 2? I asked, though something in his tone told me he was already considering it. I stepped back. Negotiate my exit from active operations. Transition my territory and legitimate holdings to neutral management. Pay reparations for past conflicts, and remove myself from the game entirely. His eyes met mine. I'd still have wealth, resources, security. But I'd no longer be a target. Neither would you or Dasam. They'd accept that? Jinho asked, skepticism clear in his voice. The Nakamura don't want endless war any more than we do. They want revenge, yes, but what they really want is stability. If I remove myself as a threat, offer them compensation and territory, they might take it. Do-yoon's jaw tightened. It would mean surrendering everything I built, admitting defeat, becoming nothing in a world where I've been everything. You wouldn't be nothing, I said quietly. You'd be Dasam's father. You'd be free. I'd be weak.
No.
I took his hand, lacing my fingers through his bloodied knuckles. You'd be brave. It takes more courage to walk away from power than to cling to it. He stared at our joined hands, warring with himself. This man who'd built an empire on fear and respect, who'd never backed down from a fight, being asked to surrender the only identity he'd ever known. What kind of man walks away? He asked, voice barely audible. The kind who knows what actually matters. I squeezed his hand. We stepped back, Do-yoon. We choose the path where Dasam grows up with her father alive, present, and clean. Where you get to be more than Kim, Do-yoon the monster. Where you get to be just ours. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the moment the decision crystallized. He turned to Jin-ho. Set up a meeting with the Nakamura. Tell them I'm proposing terms. Complete exit, territorial concessions, financial compensation. And tell them, his voice hardened, tell them if they don't accept, I won't surrender. I'll burn their entire organization to the ground and salt the earth behind me. Jin-ho's eyes widened slightly, the most emotion I'd ever seen from him. You're serious? Make the call. 2 years later, I stood in the courtyard watching Dasam move through an advanced kata sequence, her movements fluid and powerful. She was 11 now, taller, more confident, competing in adaptive martial arts tournaments and winning. The crimson blindfold was still her signature, but now it was a choice, a symbol of strength rather than trauma. Ms. Walker, she called out, grinning. Did you see that combination? I saw it, warrior. Beautiful. She laughed, that free and easy sound that still made my heart swell. Behind me, I heard familiar footsteps. Do-yoon's arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. He'd changed too, softer around the edges, the constant tension gone from his shoulders. His businesses were legitimate now, his days filled with board meetings and charity galas instead of territorial disputes. Some nights he still woke gasping, haunted by the man he used to be. But most nights, he slept peacefully beside me. Dasam, he called out. Come here for a moment. She navigated to us perfectly, her spatial awareness so refined she barely needed to think about it anymore. Yes, Appa? He took my hand, and I felt something small and hard pressed against my palm. My breath caught. Sloane Walker, he said, his voice steady but emotion-filled. You saved my daughter's life. You saved mine. You taught us both that strength isn't about dominance. It's about choosing love even when it's terrifying. I looked down. A ring. Simple, elegant, perfect. Will you officially become what you've already been for 2 years? Will you be Dasam's Amma? My wife? My family? Tears blurred my vision.
Yes.
Yes, of course yes. Dasam squealed and threw her arms around both of us. Does this mean I can officially call you Amma now? You can call me whatever you want, sweetheart. If this story touched you, if you believed in second chances, in choosing love over power, in broken people healing together, then you're exactly the kind of person I want in this community. Hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me what you felt, and stay for the final moment that makes everything complete. Amma, she said firmly, testing it out. Then again, with joy. Amma. Later that night, after Dasam was asleep and we were curled together in bed, I took Do-yoon's hand and placed it on my stomach. There's one more thing, I whispered. He looked at me, confused. Then understanding dawned, his eyes going wide. You're pregnant. About 8 weeks. His hand trembled against my stomach. Another chance, he breathed. Another chance to do it right from the beginning. We're doing it right now, I corrected. All of us together. He pulled me close, his lips against my hair. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for teaching us both how to fight for what matters. Outside, Los Angeles glittered in the darkness. But here, in this room, in this life we'd chosen, we'd already won. Because sometimes the greatest act of strength isn't standing your ground, it's knowing when to walk away. It's choosing the people who see you over the power that defines you. It's teaching a blind girl to fight not so she can hurt others, but so she'll never again forget her own worth. Dasam would grow up knowing that real warriors don't rule through fear. They lead through love. That the bravest thing her father ever did wasn't building an empire. It was walking away from one. And me? I learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stay. Stay when every instinct screams to run. Stay when love means risking everything. Stay when choosing family means choosing the unknown. We'd all been broken in different ways, by violence, by loss, by the weight of who we thought we had to be. But we'd also learned something most people never discover, that healing isn't about becoming who you were before the breaking. It's about becoming someone entirely new, together. If you made it this far, you're my kind of person. Someone who believes in redemption, in second chances, in love that's strong enough to rewrite the ending. I've got more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to let their past define their future, who chose courage over comfort, who found family in the most unexpected places. Hit that subscribe button because next time, we're diving into a story that'll shake you even harder. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever had to choose between who you were and who you wanted to become? I read every single one. This is more than just stories. This is us, figuring out what it means to be human, one choice at a time. I'll see you in the next one.